gay people, they can't go underground. It's quite curious. There was one thing that I wanted to talk about. Okay, so like you all know about this little content creator. It's not that like that little, but you all know about the content creator Sneako, right? Y'all heard of him? He's been in the news. He's been kind of in vogue recently with a lot of people talking about him, going on about like a lot of stuff regarding him. Unfortunately, yeah, a lot of people say unfortunately. In my, oh no, I'm covered in dog hair. In my experience, he seems quite, as the kids say, giga cringe. But once again, that's, you know, that's my understanding of it. Other people have their other feelings, and obviously, with like the way his channel is growing, some people don't feel that way. It'd be that way. But no matter who you are or what you do, you'll be more, as long as you're loud enough and annoying enough, you'll find an audience of people who will want to subscribe to you for it. That's just kind of how it works. I mean, Andrew Tate was a literal human trafficker who said that he wanted to move countries, so the likelihood of him being arrested and tried for sexually assaulting multiple women would go down dramatically. He still had a massive audience. So if they can, there are literal Nazis who have like massive audiences. So if he can, anybody can, really. That's kind of just how it works. And I was researching, I wanted to do a little segment on him, not necessarily to like how other people were doing it. I just kind of wanted to see what was going on, what we could like learn from this sort of like new arc of new weirdo who's just popped up and everything. But the more I looked into him, I went in, I didn't like him. I still don't like him, right? But I went in really not liking him. And I've come to the conclusion at the very end that he's more, that I have more pity for him than I do anger for him, you know? I do genuinely feel a little bad for him, the way that his life has necessarily gone, because it's not kind of like how other people come up. In the way in which he's come up, I think he's really lost something to trade this sort of like fame that he's been able to have now, rather than just like naturally grow like other people or content creators do, if I'm going to be completely honest. Let me take a sippy of water. He unironically needs therapy. I think so. Like, unironically, yes. I am going to say, I'm going to do a little bit of psychoanalysis here. It's a little cringe, but I'm going to do it anyways. Because I would like to say something that I know a lot of you people may find a little curious, and it'll lead into like another type of video that I want to be doing sometime in the future. But I see myself in him a bit. You know, after going through everything, I really do see myself in him just a little bit, and more than I think a lot of people may say, because of the way in which his life has kind of gone, especially when it comes to just like online, right? And it's really curious. So I would like to say that I think, honestly, Sneako's going through, it's not a midlife crisis, but an early life crisis at the moment. In the way in which he's going about all this, I would 100% say he's a bit in an early life crisis at this very moment for like who he is, what he's doing, and where to go from here, right? Because like on his way up, like rising through like the ranks and rising through like the views and everything, he's lost a lot. He's lost his old audience is one really big thing that he lost. You can see a lot of people who talk about him now, and they say that, you know, they used to be really into his content. He used to make like really thought-provoking and really interesting content, and he used to like really like delve into really like interesting topics, and he was no like philosopher or anything. I really, for all the people who say that he was like some sort of like modern day philosopher or something, I think you're really bringing it overboard, and I think it's just because you were pretty young too when you were looking at it. It's a lot of the stuff that he made was a little, I'm 14 and this is deep. I'm not going to lie to you, but it was interesting, and it was good content nonetheless. Absolutely, I would say that. Absolutely. I feel like I said, I feel like a lot of people go too far. Like, oh man, he was like a modern day philosopher, when like they point to a video where he talked about how people view you, and in the video during it where he talked about like changing, being a different person and taking off the mask or something, he shaved his head from it being like unkept and messy to like it being more clean and something, and everyone was like, oh my god. Listen, That's a decent idea. And, at the end of the day, it was a little bit, I'm 14 and this is deep. He was making those videos when he was kind of just 14, right? But I understand that. He's like a bit of a young guy. I think we're about like the same age. I think he's 23. I'm 23, honestly. And it's the same sort of, we've kind of had like a little bit different, we've had like a similar life in the sense of how other people have viewed us like coming up, and how maybe even how that's affected us and what trauma can do to you and what being specifically a gifted child can do to you, right? I've always been somebody who a lot of teachers would call like a gifted child, right? I mean, like a lot of people can also think of this. A lot of people can also sympathize with this. Remember the sort of like parent teacher meetings where the teachers would be like, oh, they say the same thing every time. He's a good kid. Oh, he's really smart. He's really bright. Only if he applied himself, he would be the best kid in the school, the best kid in the class. He'd be one of the best kids that I've ever taught. He'd be this, he'd be that. He'd be so smart. He'd be wild. Only if he applied himself. Something along those lines. Right. And that expectation that's been put on you. I don't think anybody can really say that that's not something that if they've experienced it, that has not affected them, especially when you're so young, right? Because once again, a lot of when Sneako was making these types of videos, he was quite young, like 16, 17, 18, 19, right? That sort of stuff, even like 15, 14. He's been online for a long time. A little bit of the symptoms of what's happening is what happens when you're online for a long time, especially if you're like really young. That can not always do like the best things for you. But I think we've gone through like similar things. The only difference is he had a lot more clout when he was going through what he was doing, which could talk to the exacerbation of how like his like condition has manifested today. Because like I said, on the rise, he's lost a lot. He used to make like really interesting videos that were like really well edited of his life in New York and him moving to going to talking about things that in his own mind, to interviewing people like on the street. You hear a lot of people who watched him for a while say like, I missed his videos that he made where he like talked to people on the street. I think he called them like 1 minute podcast or something, like 1 minute interview, something along those lines, where he just like sat down and like listened to people talk about like their lives or something. And it was interesting content, especially just like asking random people about interesting things. That's interesting content. He doesn't do that anymore. What he does now is he just kind of screams at his computer screen, and he's just sitting there kind of shirtless, yelling, repeating talking points that he's heard from other people, and reviewing and reacting to other people's content without really making his own that often, and that sucks for that type of stuff to like happen. Yeah, it's a little bit of a quarter life crisis, honestly. Is Sneako an Andrew Tate fan? Yeah, we can get into that in a little bit. We can get into that in a little bit, right? Give me a moment. And when you're gifted, you think that it would give you like a really big boost in the sense of your raw talent, but it also has a lot of expectations on you, especially when you're a YouTuber and it's like your job or when it's your hobby to like maintain that sort of clout. Something even as simple as getting 10 likes compared to 5 likes on like an Instagram post can really affect somebody. And honestly, like getting your views from a lot of people who really appreciate you and who also have a lot of clout in the industry can do something as well. A lot of content creators really loved Sneako back in the day. And I'm talking like really big content creators who a lot of people called him like the content creator, like the person that they'd watch, the person that they'd enjoy watching when they weren't making content themselves. He was that channel. And even though he wasn't that big, he was punching above his weight class when it comes to his content and the amount of people who knew about it and who appreciated it and who liked it. And that puts a lot of stress on somebody. I kind of feel the same way. When it comes to like the art that I do, which is photography, I do a lot of photography. And I kind of felt that same way with people always like wanting to compliment you on your art and saying this, that, and the third and giving you like a big head about it sometimes and having an expectation to kind of keep that. It can do a lot to people. It really can. And not all in positive ways. And once like the rubber meets the road and when you're like gifted or talented or something, and the challenges of life get to be more than your raw talent or ability or acumen can do, when you have to like start to build skills off of that, it starts to kind of fall apart because you haven't really prepared for that already. You haven't always put in the work for that sometimes. And not saying that he hasn't put in the work, but it is different from somebody who instantly off the cuff is, you know, kind of popping off. And he's been making content for I think like 6, 7, 8 years now. It's been quite a while. I think about 6 years now, really. And there's a difference between somebody like that and somebody who's had to grind for much longer, getting much less content, much less, doing much less content, getting much less notoriety and things along that line, right? And I've kind of seen how I guess it can kind of wear on him and how things kind of changed. And I think like one of the big turning points for him was him like, you know, getting out of relationship with his girlfriend, or his girlfriend breaking up with him. Around that time is when he started to make content like we see now, and how a lot of people have started to turn on him. And a lot of people, once they get a lot of pushback for like what they are, what they're doing and who they are, they honestly have a couple of options. And one of those options can be to double down, right? You can either acquiesce to everybody's demands, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's very bad to do. You can not mention it really and not talk about it and just kind of move on and pretend it's not happening, or you can double down and become the villain. And I think I remember him talking to another content creator, Gideon, who asked him like, don't you think a lot of people are viewing you as the villain these days? And his response to that was, someone's got to be the villain. And I don't think that's true. Nobody has to be the villain. There are villains. We're not living in a TV show. We're not living in a movie where we have to continue the plot. There's no like script that we have to follow to make this happen. The reason why there's villains in the real world is because their villainy benefits them in some way. I think for Sneako, it can do two things: not having to come to grips with what he was and what he's become, and the inconsistency of all of that, and also feeling like he's still on top, he's still the man, he's still in your head. And even if it's not good thoughts anymore, he's still there. And so I don't think that's like a good thing to do. I don't think that's a good thing to be. And I don't think that's really sustainable to be. But I think in the sense that I've seen a lot of other people who I really disagree with, who are in like the manosphere, like red pill sort of like area, those types of people talk about him, how they used to really respect him, and he used to take care of himself. He used to go to the gym. He used to be a loving boyfriend. He used to make good content. He used to be really introspective. He used to be very interesting, and all of that has gone away. He no longer goes to the gym. He no longer is really introspective. He's loud and brass, and no longer is really very thoughtful about in like what he says. He cheated on his girlfriend. And a lot of them are even attacking him for, after he came out to say that they were in like an open relationship, in a specific scene where they talked about how, where he talked about how they were he was in an open relationship and they were like swinging with some other couple, and he was just sitting there with the other guy's girl while his girl was having the time of her life getting railed by the other dude, and he was just sitting there while they were there in the same like king size bed. And I think the worst thing that you can do when you build like I think a lot of these guys who live in these like red pill castles are in have a foundation of sand. They have really big, beautiful, illustrious and imperial castles with their content and with the amount of views that they get and the amount of clout in the area that they have and in the niche that they're in. But it's a big foundation of sand, and it can fall at any point in time, sometimes with the smallest breeze. And a lot of these guys, a lot of it, and we talked about it the other time, is cringe. When you're no longer the man, when you're no longer posting common W's for like your honestly usually pretty young audience to like, they will go away from you very quickly. They'll lose you very quickly. Keemstar experienced this. Aiden Ross experienced this a little bit as well, and other content creators experienced it, where you where no longer are you the person pointing and laughing, but now you're the person being laughed at. Nobody wants to be a fan of the lol cow. And so when that happens, then things can kind of fall apart. And Sneako was starting to experience that a little bit, how his castle is starting to crumble a little bit, with a lot of other people talking about now how he's lying about like another large content creator who's been in the space for a while and who is more respected, who does like interviews kind of like Andrew Cullihan, but he's more like in the like rap sphere. I don't know his name, but a lot of people. But he's starting to make enemies with the wrong person. He's starting to be villains of the wrong protagonists. Okay, he's starting to be villains of the wrong heroes, and that's starting to lead to him having a lot more trouble than he used to. And the tough guy attitude can only go so far when, at the end of the day, you can be the villain all day long and it can be fun, screaming and yelling at people and telling them that they're losers, that they're gay, that they're this, that, and the third. But when it finally comes down to it and you turn the stream off and, you lay in your bed, you can kind of think of, is this really what I want? Is this really like who I am? And the inconsistencies of like what you are starting to creep in. I kind of understand that. And I feel like I see myself in him a little bit because of like the big breakup as well. I didn't, cheat on my girlfriend like that. But I can say that one thing that did happen is that it did change me a bit, but we moved in different directions. While I, spent my time, I did other things to like get my mind off of like the breakup and everything. I started collecting plants. I started reading more. I started to be more involved in my local politics and more involved in my channel that was defunct for a little while because I stopped making types of the content that I was really, caring about and wanting to make when I was, younger, right? And when I was in a relationship, I just didn't have time to make that type of content. If I had free time, I wanted to spend it with my girlfriend, and I wasn't making content like that. And so I picked that up and I started doing that, and now here I am today. But I'm not as controversial, and I'm not as out there, and I didn't have the same audience to like, fiend off of and like catapult myself into a new venture that would be like, his second channel that he started to spend a lot of time on. Because if you type in just Sneako, you'll find his normal channel that is basically now defunct, that has all that old content that people really enjoyed, that he was like swinging above his weight class when it comes to a lot of that stuff. Because I feel the same way. A lot of people feel that same way about me, like, Lance the Surf, Vash, and Zan when I was smaller and everything, and other like larger content creators, like Noah, and I think Nick is Not Green even watches the channel sometimes, and Adam from Your Movie Sucks as well, like really enjoys the content, which is an incredible thing, honestly. And a lot of other content creators as well, who I probably can't name off the top of my head at the moment. Sorry, but hi, thank you for watching. I really appreciate you. And other people like that. I think even like Hassan's watched like a video or two or something. I forget. There's a lot of other content creators who say the same thing, that are like, and you've probably seen it. They're like, oh, your content is so good. Oh, you're swinging above your weight class. Oh, you're so thoughtful for your age. Oh, Shark, he's like the early 20-year-old with the wisdom of a 60-year-old or something. The content creator, kind of like that, little smaller, different niche. But I find myself in this same area with like the big breakup that like changed me and like changed the way I kind of like look at the world, and how like it's so easy to lean into the hate and lean into how other people view you, where it's just like, everybody wants me to be a monster. Why don't I just become the monster? Right. And it's turned from him making the sort of thought-provoking content that he used to make, to making fun of the thought-provoking content on his new channel now. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that before, but it's incredibly interesting to go from the old sort of like thoughtful content that he used to make to him being like me, like, oh, this content's so cringe, boring. But it's the same exact content that he used to make, that everybody loved him for, Yeah, a little bit of lightning in a bottle. And and it's really sad to see. What, he wants to go out? You wanna leave, buddy? He doesn't know what he wants. He has no clue what he wants. And I think it's already been, I think like a lot of YouTube and content creation is already hard for a lot of us like minority creators. There's no reason for us to make it harder ourselves. But honestly, when I look at Sneako now, I just kind of see like I just kind of see like a sad kid who doesn't know how to deal with hurt and being laughed at, just kind of like wanting to become the villain because it's easier than coming to grips with you actually being hurt. When was the last time you heard him talk about things like going to therapy and becoming better? He himself like says that self-help is cringe and self-help are for people who are lower in life than him, because he's moved past self-help. Even though he sits in his room alone, drinking in his apartment, yelling into his computer and falling off the chair comically and pretending to sleep to videos that like criticize him and like what he's talking about now, and even making fun of like what was his old content, right? And even though that makes you a lot more money, you gain something like clout and notoriety and money. I think you lose a bit of yourself when you do that. And I think he's lost a good amount of himself when he's done all that. And honestly, I think it's pretty sad. It is genuinely pretty sad. You see a lot in his videos these days where he'll do something, he'll, make a joke or something. It'll kind of be like Tate-esque, and you'll see a lot of people in this comment section these days going, you're not, saying a single phrase, you're not Tate, you're not Tate, you're not Tate, and I kind of wonder if a lot of this was because he saw somebody who kind of is what he wanted to be, but more successful and cooler and more, respected when, for a while he was, at least. You'll see him copying a lot of Tate's mannerisms and copying a lot of like what Tate did with all the time that he spent with him. He even copied Tate's like Hustlers University. He even like ripped his fucking Hustlers University and started to make his own like TikTok industrial complex where he like posts clips and things along those lines. I think it's very curious. It's very sad. And it's very curious as well. And we can say it's insecurity. We can say this, that, and the third. I think it's because he's honestly really just trying to find himself. I think he's really just trying to find himself again. The boy may be a little lost, and that really sucks. And so, yeah, I'm not really sure what the future holds for Sneako, honestly. We're probably going to be doing some debate reacts sometime here in the future. But it's got me really thinking about like who I am and how I see myself as well. Because I've talked about it every once in a while, but I've been on the kind of like, I've been like in like the side current of the slipstream and the riptide of like the manosphere space. I told you, you guys, I used to watch Sargon. I used to watch like Bearing, right? Roaming Millennial when she used to be, Roaming Millennial back in the day. And some other like manosphere people, like back when I was watching and doing that type of stuff, like Fresh and Fit and a lot of those guys, they weren't really making content then. Right. But like, I think I watched a little bit of No Bullshit long time ago when they didn't talk about like how white people are the most oppressed minority to ever grace the planet Earth. But when they talked about cringe feminists gets mad when I say stupid, episode 653, Lamau, videos like that. I'd be on the treadmill. Honestly, it seems like Sneako's just kind of given up on life. I'm not going to lie to you. At like 23, it seems like the guy has kind of just given up on life. He used to be traveling. He used to work out. He had like a nice relationship. He had a well-respected channel. He used to be in like a great niche and on the come up. It seems like he's just kind of given up, and it's really sad. And I've been there before. I've just given up too. And like I said, I've been kind of in like that like slipstream of, women. And the saddest part is that I know like the sort of manosphere stuff makes him feel strong. It makes him feel smart because, you're hitting on, I think one truth and two lies. But it's like a lot of the manosphere and red pill stuff it's much more dangerous than full lies, because they're not just telling full lies. Absolutely not. I think a half truth is far more dangerous than a full lie, because there's something that people can still point at to say that that's still true, right? And so it still sucks. It really does suck. I hope he's able to find peace one day. I hope he's able to get some real self-help one day. I can only help. I can only guess. Drinking alone in your room and yelling at your computer and not wearing shirts and cheating on your girlfriend, stopping working out, stopping making like pre-recorded content and phoning it in with like just stream reacts. That's just sad. That's just sad. I'm not his friend. I don't know who he is. But just looking on the outside, from what I can see as somebody who's just able to look at mind you, it's a lot of it, life that he puts out on stream, I just see like a young guy who's just kind of given up on becoming a better person. And he says it himself. He's given up on becoming a better person since self-help is something that he no longer needs or requires. I think that's really sad. I can only hope that he gets better.